Alright everyone, so I've got a smashing game from Robert James Fischer versus pal Benko. And here Fischer demonstrates how to demolish the modern opening. So let's just get straight into it. Fischer is playing white, Benko is black. The match was played in New York 1963 and Fischer kicks off with 1e4. Benko plays g6, Fischer plays d4, a common move, and bishop g7, knight c3, d6. And we're into a Pirc defence, and Fischer now plays f4 into the Austrian attack, and Benko plays knight to f6. Fischer plays knight to f3, so white's got this nice setup of three central pawns, and the idea for black is to attack on the flanks and potentially thrust into the centre at some point with e5. Here, black castles, and Fischer plays bishop to d3 to support the e4 pawn, and already I think Benko went slightly wrong here. He played bishop g4, which actually isn't that great of a move. Instead, typically knight c6 is played here, and this is just a main line, just like e5, d takes and f takes. Knight h5, bishop e3 and bishop g4 followed by bishop e2. And this is just like a typical line that could have been played. Instead, bishop g4 actually now forces black to take the f3 knight. That's not actually a bad thing, but once white plays h3 is what Fischer did. Bishop takes, queen takes, now black plays knight c6. So black's idea was to attack his d4 pawn, but white's got the queen out already and he's preparing moves like g4 and f5 straight away. So if anything, black's just aided white here. So Fischer just plays bishop to e3 to protect the pawn, but now black thrusts in the centre with e5, typically what they should do. And Fischer just captures on e5, captures on e5, and now plays the correct move, just playing f5, trying to attack black's king side. Knight d4 was an option for black here, but I think Fischer might just do what he did in the game and retreat the queen back. And after c5, g4, it looks as though white's gaining a good attack. Black does have the knight in the centre, so this was probably better than what happened in the game. In the game, Benko actually took on f5, and again, I don't think this is a great move because it just opens up the g file for white. Fischer took on f5, and now black plays knight d4, attacking the queen. And I don't think white wants to take this really, because if bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, queen f3, and c6, white can castle queenside, so it is unbalanced, but black seems to be quite well into the game here. Knight e2, queen d6, g4. White does have the attack, but again, it's quite secure for black compared to the game that happened. So I think bishop takes d4 is a mistake. White wants to maintain the attack with that bishop on e3. So he plays queen to f2. Benko plays a weird move, knight to e8, but I think he's preparing f5. So this is something white needs to be wary of. So I think what black's trying to do is move the knight to d6 and then play f5, but this might be too slow. Instead, Fischer just castles here and builds up the attack. So this f7 pawn is now a massive target. But Benko gets on with his plan, plays knight to d6, maybe preparing f5. I don't think it actually works here. But instead, Fischer just sidesteps this with queen to g3. Rook ad1 was an idea as well. I switched the computer on here and it gave rook e8 and g4 for white. It's hard to think of moves for black really. I think of like a decisive plan. c6 was an idea, knight to e2, knight to e6 and king h2. White's idea really is just to build up slowly in a computer fashion, so without making any mistakes. I think actually Fischer played the correct move though. Queen g3 just sidesteps this f5 move, and now he's preparing bishop to h6, where this bishop on g7 is pinned. So black correctly plays king h8 to avoid this. Now I think Fischer's move here is actually really clever, and something players can learn from. He just simply plays queen g4 with the idea of playing queen h5. I think in this position it's very hard to see that this bishop could be opened up to attack the black king. But Fischer saw that after queen g4 and black played c6 and queen h5, the idea now is for white just to capture on d4 and thrust this e5 pawn up. And that was where Fischer is going to open up the attack. Amazingly, I think Benko actually missed this, because you'd think if the bishop wants to capture on d4, just simply move the knight away. Now it's not winning, but I think it's better than what happened in the game. If knight e6, rook ad1 to put pressure on the d6 knight, queen to e7, and white now has to build up slowly with Rook f3, b6, Rook f1, and maybe knight c5, where white could play b4, takes f6, and knight to e2. So white's building up very slowly, preparing knight g3, maybe knight to f5, maybe g4. But in the game, Benko, I think stupidly, actually played queen to e8 here. And this just falls straight into Fischer's plan. Fischer now just took on d4, and e takes d4. Maybe Benko thought e5 doesn't work, because if e5, just f5, and black's gained equality, so maybe this is what Benko saw. So white's now forced to swap queens off and play knight to a4, and here it's actually dead even, so maybe this is what Benko thought. So maybe I'm being a bit harsh when I say that the queen to e8 move here is not very good. So queen e8, Fischer took on d4 like I say, e takes d4. Now this is the move that Benko missed, and it's actually a genius move. I'll give you 5 seconds, I'll pause the video and see if you can see it. Now then, the clever move that Fischer spotted, well, he noted first of all that e5 doesn't work because of f5, so how do you stop f5 being played? Well, Fischer came up with this move. He just played Rook to f6, and what this does is it attacks the knight on d6, prepares e5, and just sacrifices the rook. So if bishop captures that rook, just play e5 and it's game over. There's no way to defend that pawn unless you block it with the knight, and then just captures will happen. So yeah, black could resign here. After Rook f6 though, Benko played king g8, and Fischer just followed up with e5. So now white is threatening queen takes h7 checkmate, and Benko defends this by playing h6. But now Fischer just plays knight to e2, moving the knight away from the d4 pawn, and Benko actually resigned here. So why did he resign? Well, if bishop takes f6, just queen takes h6 and queen h7 is unstoppable. If a move like knight b5 moving away from that rook, just queen f5, and again queen h7 is unstoppable. If a move like c5, then rook takes h6 actually works here, because bishop takes, queen takes, and again the threatening mate on h7. And if f5, just queen takes d6, and white's got 2 pieces for the rook and a massive attacking advantage. In this position, Fischer would definitely make light work of black's position and lack of pawns in front of that king. For instance, bishop c4 check immediately comes to mind. So again, this wasn't a long game, but I think it's a really good example of how you can attack your opponent and systematically work out how to checkmate the king. So for instance here, Fischer just figured out that f5 is stopping the checkmate, so how do we block f5? Just by dumping your rook on f6, and everything else just works easily. So I hope you enjoyed that game. I'll be with you with more chess videos very soon. If you did like this video, please drop me a like and maybe a subscribe if you want to watch more chess content in the future. Thank you very much.